We have a very special guest with us today on Dance Lens podcast, Alec Knight, soloist with New York City Ballet, and we're talking about his upcoming debut in Balanchine's Western Symphony. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you got into dance?
Ballet in general was sort of a big snowball effect for me. It happened very quickly. I had been dancing for a few years, not in ballet, and ballet was not sort of where I was setting my sight on. But when I was at the Australian Ballet School, I was a teenager and I was just, I think, frustrated with where it was going for me at that time. And what the school in Australia did really well was they provided classes that were a little bit more like vast. So I was taking a dance history class, I think it was, and we were doing an assignment and we had to like choose an influential dance maker. And I was assigned George Balanchine, and I had no idea who that was. I was like, okay, George Balanchine. And at that time, there weren't a lot of opportunities to see New York City Ballet's rep online. They were very limited. And so I remember the first clip I found was Western Symphony, fourth movement, just the fourth movement, the rondo, the finale with Nikolai, and I think it was Kira Nichols. And it was like my eyes jumped out of my head because my love for Broadway, my love for theatrics, my love for jazz and tap, like it was all just there, but it was still classical ballet. I was like, I cannot believe that there was a classical ballet company that is dancing like this. It just looked, everyone was having so much fun and they were jumping as high as they could and it was so fast. Like I remember just being like, wow, how are they dancing with that much speed and that much precision? And so that was sort of the pin drop for me. And I did the assignment, and at that time, my father was coming over to the US, and he had some work opportunities here, and I came over and I took a class with the School of American Ballet with Jock Soto, and they invited me to the summer program. And yeah, that summer I was asked for the winter to come full time, and then at the end of that year, they posted the workshop ballets, and what ballet is going other than Western Symphony, fourth movement. And they were filming something at the time, so they weren't sure if they were going to get two casts on, but they did, and I was the second cast, and so I got to perform the fourth movement of Western Symphony for my first workshop at the School of American Ballet. And it was with one of my dear friends at the time, and then getting into the company, and then I was in the first movement, and now here I am about to do the principal in the first movement. And so it feels like throughout this career, there's so much that changes and your body changes, and that there are sort of like these anchoring points that sort of reassure you that you're on the right path and that the work has been for something and worth something. And that's definitely a ballet for me that holds a lot of meaning to me. And jumping back a little bit, when I came back from my knee operation, I had an ACL and a meniscus repair. And Western Symphony was also the first ballet that I did coming back from that surgery. And the listeners who don't know, haven't seen the ballet, it ends in this iconic way with all of the dancers doing these pirouettes from fifth, which is very difficult at the end of a ballet. We all have to be in unison. We all have to be in these specific lines. And the curtain comes down and we're in motion. And it's almost like we are turning for all of eternity. And this sounds so dramatic and so Hollywood, but it was true. I was so relieved that I had made it back to the stage in this ballet, and I just had tears coming down my eyes. And yeah, it just feels like, I don't know, a reminder of something, a reminder of a younger version of myself that set out on this crazy adventure. And yeah, I think it's going to be a very, very special show for me.
I think a lot of people don't realize that when a dancer debuts in a role, it changes not only the dancer, but the work. Because then, the history of the work is different, right? If we're going to go through the annals of ballet history, every time a dancer enters, it's changed. And then you're changed because of your rep. So how are you feeling in this process?
I think anytime you have a debut, especially with like a Balanchine ballet or a Robbins ballet, something that has such a really extensive like lineage before you, it's sort of difficult. You sort of find that fine line between wanting to find someone that has danced it similarly to you or like conveys a similar style or aesthetic. So you can see yourself in that archival process and sort of choose things that you feel might highlight your strength. But at the same time, it's tricky because you just said this really nicely. It is about bringing yourself to the work and about changing that work because you established yourself in it. So this ballet, Western Symphony specifically, I have a very long history and admiration for. It's one of my favorite ballets, which whenever I tell that to people, they're always a little bit shocked because it's very, I don't think that many people would say that. But yeah, I think with a debut, I have a couple big debuts this season, both Balanchine ballets, and I've really been trying to find myself in them. I've been sort of diving headfirst into the world of Western, and sort of trying to then completely switch gears. And, there's actually a similarity in the way that he choreographed Romanticism. And I think what's really interesting about Western Symphony, which a lot of people, I think, sometimes misunderstand, is, with something like Western, where it can be deemed on the nose, it can be very sort of simple, right? But he was more interested in, like, how do I say this? It's like an aesthetic rather than a reality that I'm trying to portray. It's really been about finding those nuances because we are not evoking people. We are evoking a style. We're evoking an aesthetic. And it's one of my favorite aesthetics, and it's interesting. It's come at a time when we're really seeing a lot of that influence even in pop culture, right? We have Beyonce, Cowboy Carter, and we saw like Barbie, and like it really is at the forefront of a lot of these cultural aesthetics. So it's been interesting and fun to be able to bring those into the studio and find ways to bring a ballet that has such a substantial history to it, but find a way to like connect that with new audiences and make it still relevant in 2025.
It's really interesting that you bring up that it's a theme in the broader pop culture, because I think also with the current historical context that we're in, it's like there's this broader question of like, who are we as a people? And then there are these styles and types of music that really do belong to us. So you'll see that popping up. It's like the artist is always a reflection of their time. Like that Graham quote when she says the artist is not ahead of their time, they are their time, and everybody else is behind. So you see the artist like looking at the collective, like who are we? Who are a couple of the dancers that you might have looked at when you were getting ready for this?
You can never go past like Jacques D'Amboise. He was like the epitome of a prince who also knew how to like strip away all of that pretentious ego and just be a human with this like gigantic personality on stage. He almost read from the inside out in those sorts of roles. The first time I ever saw this ballet, it was Nicolas Hubert doing the fourth movement, which is a really interesting story, which I'm sure we'll get to. But I really connected with that video because he's not American, right? And neither was Balanchine, and I'm not, so I'll be the first Australian cowboy out there. And I think that there is something really, we always take for granted the things that we don't know or recognize as our own, that we do recognize as our own or that are inherently ours. And for me, coming over to the United States, there was so much sort of backlog of cultural things that I had to like understand and know. And I really fell in love with a lot of like the old Wild West portrayals and that caricature, and really understanding Balanchine's love for America through that lens. And, the same with a lot of the other ballets that he had that are really sort of homages to this country, Stars and Stripes and Rubies. And that was really what hook, line, and sinkered me into his world and his choreography. It was very much that loud, boisterous adoration of this country and its history, as complex as it is. I was very, very excited to understand the people that have done these roles before me. And Jock Soto, who I speak about a lot, who was my teacher, there's a video of him and hated the movement, the first movement that I'm debuting, and I've done a lot of his roles, and I always sort of panic text him because he does a lot of hard roles, and this role is so difficult. And I was so unprepared for how hard it really is. Once the lead couple come on, we don't leave. And the pas de deux is very swooping. There's lots of lifts, lots of bends, lots of really intricate off balance. Trusting pottering steps, right, that are quite difficult. And typically, right at the end of a pas de deux, you would bow, you would go off. Either you would go straight into the coda or you would come back for a finale. But this composition, this body of work, it sort of naturally progresses and keeps getting bigger and bigger. And we finish the pas de deux and we go straight into the finale. And the finale is all virtuosity, it's all turns and jumps, and you're also still trying to obtain this really high level of classicism and this technique that's required to be able to do these steps. But you're layering on this entire persona, this style, this swagger that you need in order to still be able to sell the story. I remember the first time my partner, Alexa Maxwell, who we do a lot of stuff together and we have a great time together. She's one of my dearest friends. We really looked at each other with some panic and we were like, oh my God, okay. We thought this was going to be such a fun walk in the park experience, and we are a little nervous about it. It just takes a lot of stamina to do it justice, I think.
Is it a debut for her as well?
It is a debut for her. Yeah.
Wow.
And I think whenever you debut with someone that's also doing a debut, there's this unparalleled energy. You know, oftentimes with big roles, they would prefer or they lean towards having one person make a debut with a seasoned, like, veteran or dancer that's already done the role. And there's definitely pros to that. You have someone sort of advising you, like, go easy here. This is where you want to take it slower. This is where you want to push. And when you have two debuts, like, I think we came out, because the entrance that we make is very grand, and the quarter ballet's been dancing for about 5 minutes before we come on, which I've always prefer. I really don't like starting on stage. So yeah, I think we just came out with so much energy and so much vigor, and we realized very quickly that that's not sustainable. We really have to pace ourselves.
You're such a gorgeous dancer. Like, to me, you so look like an Adonis. Like, and this role is so playful and obviously difficult, as we just talked about. But if you were to typecast yourself, would you see this as being something that's a natural fit? And has that changed over time?
What, you don't think I can be playful? I wore my cowboy hat just for this podcast.
Okay, perfection. You can even leave it on if you want.
Okay, no, I mean, I appreciate that. The conversations about typecasting and what I see myself in versus what someone else might see me in is always like a confronting and like, and so like it's a confronting conversation as a dancer, because we all tread the line of aspiration and having these dream roles, and you know, you kind of have to have a little bit of delusion about this career, because it's sort of what keeps you pushing forward, right? Like we're so hard on ourselves, and it's so easy to be self-critical that if you didn't have these roles to sort of act as your guiding lights, I imagine it would be very easy to just sort of be paralyzed. So for me, like, in all honesty, I felt like I have had a lot of comments throughout my life about the way that I look and the way I present and what roles are most suited to me. But if you were to ask me what role in our represents or feels the most close to who I am on the inside as a human being, I would say absolutely this is a ballet that I'm meant for. I'm such a playful, positive human, and I love the camaraderie of big, boisterous ballets. You know, I have been in the core of Western Symphony since I was an apprentice. And what I love about that first movement is that all the core remain on stage and you watch the principal couple. And I saw so many different approaches to that role. You know, I saw Alec Knight do it, who is this gigantic Danish man, and he's the softest, most kindest human being. And to watch his delicacy with his ballerinas was always something that was very informative to me. And then I watched Taylor Stanley do it, who, as you know, is one of the most talented but enigmatic dancers of our time. And that was such a different approach because it was very much a completely different idea of what that part of it could be. And I just remember always saying, like, I could do this and I want to do this and I know exactly who I would be if I did this. And you sort of backlog them in your head, right? Because you never want to get your hopes up so high for a role that you're disappointed if it doesn't happen. And there are so many things that go into these casting decisions. You know, does someone want to do it again? Is it ready for someone to let go of the role? Is there someone that's younger than you that they're trying to challenge? So there's all of these sort of conversations and considerations that happen in real time. And when it aligns and you are sort of put into the moment and you can say to yourself, I wanted this for 10 years. And I really feel like it's probably taken me 10 years to be ready to look at this role next week and be like, I'm so ready for this. Like, I'm gonna have so much fun. I know I can do everything that it involves. I know I got a little off topic with that question, but it is a role that I really believe I am going to take good care of and that I did see myself in. But you're right. I think that there have been a lot of other sort of laneways that I've been put into that, for better or worse, have informed me and made me a better dancer as well.
And all of that, it's like the typecasting, it's really just an entry point to think about a dancer. Like, you can enter through this window, but it really doesn't mean anything. Like, in the Soviet Union, Baryshnikov was typecast as principal character roles. Like, so he was allowed to play Basil in Don Quixote, but he wasn't allowed to play the prince in Swan Lake, or, I mean, maybe, I don't know if he ever did it literally, but typically he was not considered, you know, the main character. And then he comes here and takes all of those roles and changes how we see the male dancer.
I mean, I see both sides. I feel like the typecasting, like, again, we have such a close sort of evolution from Balanchine's leadership, and we're still informed by a lot of his students, right? And the voices of his aesthetic and the voices of his technique. And even within that community of dancers, there's still a lot of differing opinions and ideas of what he thought was right or wrong. And so I think that the typecasting comes probably from how these roles were created and who they were created on, which does make sense to me. I do think in the last few years, and, you know, giving credit where it's due, they have sort of started to offer different portals for dancers to do things that they might not typically have been thought of, like tall people doing smaller rep that was typically created or deemed to be for smaller people, and vice versa. And I think that that's, you know, incredibly important. I remember watching a soloist, Ashley Hard, take on like the Russian girl, which is a no-brainer because she has a jump that is astronomical. And I know that she also understudies square dance now. And so it's cool to see these different opportunities opening up based on merit and talent, and, like, you know, like what people can actually do based, like, versus what they look like. So that's cool. That's exciting.
I think there's like this really beautiful parallel, because a few minutes ago you were talking about the layers of culture that you had to get into to understand where this kind of aesthetic would come from. And it's like a lot of the early cowboys were Germans. If you go, there's this museum in the Dust Bowl in Texas where it's a Texas history museum, but it's like you know, you can see the tools that people used, and they have like actual houses. You know how I don't know how they do this, but it's like they move houses and put it onto the museum. Like, you know, when you go to the Met, you can see some like living room from Damascus from the 1100s. But in this Texas History Museum, they also have dugouts, like where the cowboys would live, you know, these early immigrants. So it's like this story of joy and hope and difficulty and beauty and playfulness woven throughout. It's also your story.
That's an interesting point of view. I think that, like, there's still these moments where I still feel like that 13-year-old boy from another country who's just sort of like faking it a little bit until I made it.
Can you tell us what some of your favorite dream roles are, and which ones of them have you danced?
Yeah, I have actually danced A few of them. The biggest apex for me was the second movement of Symphony in C. That role was one that I had learned in school, sort of as an experiment. We were given that partitur, and it's so difficult. It's all lifting, it's all balances, it's complete trust, and the music is the most beautiful music in the world. And sort of, I always said to myself, like, if I got to perform that, if I got to the point when a company trusted me with that, I would have done sort of what I set out to do in terms of bettering my skill and being able to be trusted as a partner in that way. And it came a lot earlier in my career than I thought it would. So that was a really interesting and difficult process for me. I debuted that before I had debuted the Nutcracker partitur. And going into second movement Symphony in C is like going to like 100, right? Like, and so I sort of did that role, and I can look back now and say that I don't think I was fully prepared for it. It went well, all the shows were fine, and I've done it for 2 seasons now, but I sort of had to then like work backwards a little bit and sort of make up for all of the roles that I think maybe would have prepared me for something like that. And I see why John gave it to me, and it was a really incredible opportunity for me to grow and to trust myself, because I think there was a lot of self-doubt, and I think that John saw that in me, and so it was a really incredible opportunity. But that was a dream role that came in a very unexpected way. And the sort of other roles, yeah, like After the Rain, I got to debut this summer for the band festival and at Jacob's Pillow, and that was also with Alexa, who I'm dancing Western with. What else? The Merry Widow in Vienna Waltzes, and this Western Symphony was one. So there's sort of a very bizarre hodgepodge of roles, but I don't know, I guess I never really looked at like an archetype of dancer and wanted to replicate that. I would look at the roles, and I would look at the depth in which the people can give themselves to the roles, and the moments that stand out for me or that I remember the most are the ones where I remember the artist in the role, right? Like, I don't just remember them for like who they were. I remember them becoming these versions of themselves in these parts that I wanted the opportunity to do for myself. And one of the other big roles for me is Slaughter on 10th Avenue, because I grew up tap dancing. Tap dancing is sort of my long lost love. I haven't done it in a really long time, but I understudied the lead in that for a really long time, and so I'm hoping that will come back at some point. But yeah, I've been very fortunate to really have these. A lot of them are actually surprisingly theatrical, which isn't intentional, something that I set out to really accomplish. But I think a lot of them, what they do have in common is a really, really heavy reliance on partnership, on connection, on trust. And they're all really big things that I value in myself and in my partners that I dance with. And the rep, I really love connecting with someone on stage, and I love the women that I get to be around and work with. And that's a huge thing for me. I'm very, very, very comfortable, and I have a preference actually for, I think, feminine energy in the studio. And I find that interesting about Western Symphony is, to sort of segue into something else completely different. I have been like watching this ballet a lot in these videos, and it would be really easy to think about cowboys and saloon girls and like what that would represent or what that means, and like, is it problematic? Is it relevant right now? But like most of his works, the power is in the ballerina and all of these movements in very different ways. Like the first movement of Western Symphony, they meet and there's almost this flirtatious challenging with one another. But from the very beginning of the partitur, it's the ballerina who looks over at me and does this really cute like shoulder invitation, right? Like she's inviting him to dance with her. And then in the partitur, like he sort of grabs her in this swooping embrace and she separates herself from him. And again, she runs over and then she looks over her shoulder and she says, okay, you can dance with me again. So I find that like really ahead of the curve in terms of a lot of the works that were made in the past that sort of don't work in that way. They are really aggressive and really man heavy, and that goes right until the end, right? Like she takes his hat from him at the end and like she jumps on his shoulder and there's this really there's this power and this claiming of power that she has. And then you go to the second movement where, you know, you have a very sort of melodramatic and mopey cowboy who's on his own, and he has this, it's a vision, right, of this woman, and she's almost like whenever he gets close enough, she disappears from him again. So I find that to be a really encouraging, and I feel very comfortable doing this work and celebrating this work because of that, because it is sort of this power of the divine feminine in this setting that could be deemed not that.
Right. And especially when you think that it was choreographed in the 50s, like, you know, all of that was radical. Do you have recommendations for the audience if they were to come to see this show? Like, what should they look for?
I honestly feel like after this conversation, they'll all just be looking to see how I'm breathing after the part of out. No, I think that it's just not to be taken too seriously, in all honesty. I think that it's something that there's so much context around things now and so much social commentary, and I think it's okay to just go in and just enjoy something that is just meant to be lighthearted and meant to be community and camaraderie, and it's New York City Ballet at its best. It's speed, it's all of us on stage. We're connecting with one another. We're showing off all of our hard work, our technique, and we're doing it in a really fun way. I think that I'm always in awe of this company because of that. The range at which we can just flip and switch and change, but maintain all of that really integral technique and aesthetic that makes us who we are.
Great. Well, can't wait to see you on stage.
Yes, I can't wait.
Thank you so much for listening. If you like this and you want more great dance content, articles, podcasts, reviews, deep dives, where dance meets the arts, fashion, history, politics, and social evolutions, make sure you hit subscribe and follow us on Substack and YouTube at The Dance Lens. I'll leave you with this quote from the great choreographer Martha Graham. "I did not choose to be a dancer. I was chosen. And with that, you live all your life." Thanks again. I'm Cynthia Dragoni, The Dance Lens.